Hello everyone, thank you for coming, and I want to take a moment to acknowledge how much it's important for us to be in these spaces, because I believe that these are alternative spaces for students, for scholars, for researchers, in light of what we are seeing, like epistemic violence in different institutions, different universities, and the classrooms. I'm here today to talk about student encampments in North America universities, viewing the Ivory Tower from below. And I would like to start my talk by saying that late on April night, a small group of students gathered on a moonlit campus lawn. Their breath visible in the chill air, without any formal call or charismatic leader. They began pitching tents under the silent watch of academic buildings. One by one, more students arrived, Palestinian, Jewish, black, white, and others. Men, women, different social classes, and different and various people, carrying sleeping bags, hand-painted signs that read "ceasefire now," and Palestinian kufiyas draped around their shoulders. By dawn, dozens had swelled to hundreds. The makeshift encampment paused with quiet purpose. Some students studied by flashlight inside tents, others served hot tea and led hushed discussions about the epistemology of resistance, ethics of liberation, the West Bank, Gaza, and Edward Said's imagination on liberation. This people's camp had no official sponsor, mostly, yet it transformed an ordinary campus squad into a site of a protest. Each student's decision to simply show up and stay was small on its own. But together, these acts united into a powerful statement. They were not a formal organization staging a pre-planned rally. They were ordinary individuals collectively refusing to be silent. This scene, inspired by real events at North American universities in 2023, 2024, and some in 2025, illustrates what scholar Asef Bayat calls a social non-movement. And here maybe 2-3 lines under that. The power of everyday people without recognized leadership or hierarchy coming together through shared quiet acts of defiance to challenge the status quo. It is a story of how seemingly simple actions, such as studying under the banner of Free Palestine, can snowball into a force that shakes the Ivory Tower. This story is not an isolated incident. It speaks to a broader wave of student protest for Palestine that has swept campuses since October 2023, a wave defined less by traditional organizations and more by grassroots energy. Political activist Angela Davis recently declared, "Palestine is a moral litmus test for the world," underscoring the profound ethical stakes felt by these students. How do we make sense of a movement with no single name, no single leader, no formal membership roles, yet which mobilize so many? I argue, and maybe I'm wrong, but I argue that Bayat's concept of social non-movements is the best framework to understand this new era of campus activism for Palestine. While I am studying campuses, while much scholarly attention has been devoted to large-scale reformist and revolutionary movements, less focus has been placed on the microdynamics of resistance occurring within institutional settings. So this presentation expresses the intellectual curiosity of understanding protests in higher education, highlighting their mechanisms as more significant when they relate to Palestine in the West. And by examining anti-genocide encampments, I'm not claiming that I want to re-ontologize social movements. Instead, it contributes to the literature on social movements by expanding the scope of analysis beyond traditional Western-centric framework. Also, while studies over the past year have examined the context surrounding protest in support of Palestine, the majority, this is what I observed, that the majority have focused on the broader socio-political institutional environment rather than the internal dynamics of the protests themselves. And I feel this is why maybe it's important to understand the movement itself. This paper, particularly through a post and decolonial lens, rethinking social movements and studying the question of Palestine in academia. And the main question when I started writing this paper, the main question was why different universities in different locations with significant differences have witnessed, like almost same suppression, right? For example, in this paper, I'm talking about Columbia University and University of Alberta, one in the States, one in Canada, and you see there's so many different factors in both cases: private, public, number of students, their location, and also the history of activism in both campuses is very different. But the outcome, the same: repression of the encampment. There is repression at UFA and also at Columbia. And my hypothesis, it's around visibility and the tactics that they were used by students in light of anti-Semitism accusation and also repression itself. So I want to position myself before I start talking about the framework and the analysis, because I feel it's important. Always people talk about, like Palestinians, you should just put a line between the work and what you are doing. And here I feel positionality and research is more than acknowledging personal background. It is an essential lens that shapes inquiry. As a Palestinian scholar, my lived experience offers both intellectual and embedded insights into the repression of Palestinian solidarity movements in Western universities. Scholars like Nadra Shalhoub, Gaverkian, and Huda Abul Hajj highlight how Palestinian voices are often marginalized in academic discourse, reinforcing institutional silencing. This study not only examines institutional repression, but also challenges the exclusion of Palestinian perspectives, rejecting objectivity as detachment, critiqued by Edward Said in 1978. It aligns with the critical scholarship that values positionality for deeper, ethically grounded research, embracing positionality strengths, academic rigor, and accountability. This study, or this paper, contributes to the broader resistance against epistemic erasure, advocating for inclusive and engaged knowledge production. Like so many theories, like in the field of social movements, and if you want to read, there's a lot. And I was thinking about all of these theories, some of them here, some of them still in the paper, because there's no enough space to put them, all of them in the same table. But classic social movement theories have long provided the lens through which scholars interpret collective activism. According to this dominant view in sociology and political science, a real social movement has certain hallmark. It is organized, sustained, and coordinated, carried out by a defined collective leadership or collective students or actors. There's a shared ideology or agenda, and usually led by a specific leadership, and it's obvious. This is this is the leadership, and usually they are charismatic figures and they have specific things to do. So this model assumes a level of formal structure. For example, if we look at a student nonviolent coordinated committee in 1960s, we see all of these things that I'm talking about: leadership, agenda, and some of these, like a protest or movements, they have elections and they have the full body. Theories like resource mobilization theory or political process theory, they focus a lot about resources. They focus on, the structure, what kind of a structure in the movement, who's leading this, who's leading that, and all of these sometimes bureaucratic work. But here, what I'm trying to say, that conventional model does not fit what's happening on the ground. Bayat, and he is Iranian-born sociologist who has studied grassroots change in the Middle East during the Arab Spring, challenged the idea that meaningful activism must always take the form of an organized, conscious movement. In many settings, especially under repressive and constrained conditions, people cannot easily, it's a privilege, people cannot easily form formal organizations or march under a specific leadership. They still act collectively in other ways. Bayat's key insight is that there is a different paradigm of activism often at work, which he terms social non-movement. He defines social non-movements as the collective actions of non-collective actors. In other words, fragmented but similar activities by ordinary people that, taken together, bring about social change. These actions are not guided by one ideology or leader or one specific program, and participants may not even think of themselves as part of a united group. They are everyday people pushing back against injustice in parallel, often uncoordinated ways, driven by shared grievances and practices rather than a formal organization. So this form is powerful, even if we talk about collective action of non-collective actors. So how do these unrelated acts come together to create change? Bayat says it happens through what he famously calls a quiet encroachment of the ordinary. Social movements depend on this quiet encroachment, a slow, under the radar advance by racialized, marginalized people in their everyday life spaces. Let's unpack this concept. And here there's four main ideas in this concept. The first one is change is gradual change, is not like one press or you press on a specific button and you see the change. It's more about like everyday change. It needs time, even if the movement takes 10, 15 years. And this accumulation of little daily life actions, for example, posting on different doors or in different halls, sit-ins, teach-ins, and all kind of these actions. Informal solidarity and networks. And here, maybe this more about how this kind of non-movement build identity, which is from informal solidarity, informal social networks, peer-to-peer solidarity. People engage each other, building a collective identity quietly. And the third one, subtle disruption of power. The main idea here that social non-movement refuses to comply fully with what expected of apolitical students or apolitical places. Oh, like this campus is apolitical, let's be neutral, let's keep it apolitical. And students, in this case, by projecting this concept on them, I understand like the work and the action that students are trying to do to make the place or the campus itself, with different definition, not just something apolitical and abstracted. And the fourth one, it's about resilience. Social non-movements more resilient than social movements because there's no specific leadership that you can arrest, put them in the jail, and you end, the movement itself. And Bayat said that if you want to end this kind of social non-movement, you have to curtail a whole flow of life. For example, you have to say there's no university in the next 2 months. That's why maybe you can stop people protesting on campus. So conventional movements don't develop just anywhere and anytime. As I mentioned, and as Bayat and other scholars mentioned, it is a privilege that requires specific conditions, which are not always present for the oppressed or any specific community or group that we are talking about. Social movements, however, they work in constrained environments. They unfold behind the scenes, woven into everyday life, often avoiding direct confrontation until absolutely necessary. The goal is not an immediate victory on all fronts, but a slow accumulation of gains and an undermining of unjust power by what he called revolution. It's not revolution. Students, I agree with this concept that students have not tried to start a revolution, but also they have not asked for a reform. They didn't ask universities to reform themselves. They were talking about revolution. This is something here on campus, but also it's connected with bigger goal. We talk about liberation, we talk about, like ending apartheid, right? And Bayat said, like this is revolution without revolutionaries. There is revolution, but you don't have revolutionaries per se. And this is why this work is, is a little bit different, and it could actually, with time, but under specific tactics, could achieve specific things. So now let's talk more about student activism through Bayat's lens and everyday resistance on campus. So these are the theories. And these are some pictures, like just to, and most of them from U of A, like just to say, like, what do we mean when we say everyday resistance or daily life resistance? These pictures from different teach-ins, from encampment, stickers on different, stop signs, on different doors, in different buildings, from different backgrounds, right? But also there's, like artwork. There's something. And one day I was bored and I said, let's just put this sign. Do you have any question about Palestine in the Hub Mall? And this is like a part of the movement itself, right? And everything have been done by students at U of A, at Columbia, and also at different campuses. So here, what I want to mention, because I'm talking specifically about student activism at Columbia and at the University of Alberta, I want to say that these two specific cases on campus were the personification of social non-movement. And like I don't want to repeat what do I mean, like leaderless, and they are mostly invisible and sometimes visible based on the condition, with all of the factors that I mentioned. But the first factor, or the first point that I want to highlight, like what do I mean when I say fragmented or leaderless activism? And here maybe I want to use People's University for Palestine, right? And I feel this is very deep, like to say People's University for Palestine. You try just to make the leadership of this movement behind something like a name or a title very public and does not mention anything about people who are doing this kind of work. But if we look back in 1960s, 1965, student movement at Columbia was very, highlighted by mentioning specific names. For example, if you mention student movement in the 1960s without talking about Mark Rod, you don't study the social movement itself or the student actions or protest in 1960s. So there are specific names. They were around the movement itself. But here we talk about, more public names, like very wide and without any labels, without any specific names. Like my name was not obvious, right? So there's no Eleyan, there's no Adam, there's no XYZ in the movement, not just at U of A, even in other campuses. Number two, from a quiet build-up to visible encroachment. And here, maybe if you look at the beginning of these actions, maybe October 2023, November, December, January, February, March, until April, you see this kind of quiet build-up. Let's do teach-ins, film screening, and all of these quiet actions, right? But in April and May, we started seeing more visible encroachment because the condition was different. And Bayat said visible encroachment could be used if the situation needs that. And I feel students, they were mostly affected by pictures that were released from Gaza, and also like from, like people are killed just on camera, and we are seeing all of that. So this is also connected to why maybe the tactic itself was changed from quiet to visible. And many people actually talked about this. One of them, James Scott, he was talking about infrastructure of dissent and what spaces mean to people, and how tactics and strategies could be changed with time based on the condition itself. And here we did see everyday spaces as resistance. When U of A police and also Edmonton police tried to suppress the encampment seat here at U of A, the protests themselves did not stop, right? So everyday resistance, or students are trying to make the university everyday space of resistance, just to sustain the idea of, if you are going to shut, the encampment down, does not meaning you are going to shut the whole protest or movement down, because there is a lot of dynamics there, and one of them, everyday protest in every corner, and this was obvious. Students are doing different things in different classrooms, in different programs, different departments. And here maybe we come to number 4, horizontal solidarity and networked mobilization. And here maybe it's important just to simplify this. Students, they were saying, oh, like you are wearing kufiya, and where can I buy this? Oh, there's a table for SJB. It's in the art building or in the hub mall, and like students are asking about that. And these actions, small actions, actually they strengthen the idea of solidarity, and how students themselves can build solidarity from very basic and simple actions without starting a campaign and going to the streets, downtown, and somewhere out there to call students and people to come to their protests, right? So after I was looking, maybe we don't have enough time to talk like how I was looking at these cases. But one of the main findings that there is actually a connection between, like encroachment type and the visibility. And I think in my opinion, that universities are very scared from the idea of visibility. They don't want students to be visible at any campus, not just because they are trying to do work around Palestine, but because this kind of visible work could take a specific protest like farther to a very different point. We talk about here neoliberalism, we talk about how institutions are privatized, right? And tuition issues, EDI or DEI issues, like people from different sexual orientations, different sexual background, different ethnicities, different races. So all of these issues will play, like together, just to make the movement bigger and bigger. And I think this is why, like in the US and in Canada specifically, movement itself was repressed to the point that police was strongly involved to arrest people and to also to use weapon, like to use gas tear and to use other things, right? But I was looking also at 2 different political environments. When we have high opportunity, for example, in Canada, because sometimes this kind of multiculturalism, very romantic, like gives you that kind of a space to do things and to act. But also in the US, there's more low opportunity, and the political opportunity is more a threat. It's not an opportunity, because anti-Semitism is always there. Or you are doing this, you are anti-Jews, you are anti-Semitism, and all of these accusations, right? So maybe one of the final conclusion that regardless the encroachment type, if it was quiet, subtle, or confrontational, if we have high visibility, regardless, low opportunity in Canada or high opportunity in Canada or the States, you see repression itself. So visibility itself was one of the main things to make institutions to act in a way that they don't want to see anyone there. And this is why I feel maybe sometimes student movement itself, and I'm calling this movement, but also by quoting Asef Bayat, non-movement. So every time I say movement, I mean non-movement, right? And this is why I feel student non-movement or student movement should think again and again about some strategies. Like we all know, many people wrote many pieces about institutions and about like what kind of tools and they use their authorities to do anything to destroy the work. But also when I was looking at the student movement itself, because of the visibility and police, universities, they don't want to see all of these things. I feel students also, they need to deconstruct this kind of, like paradigm. If we want to do, for example, a specific things here at UFA or at Columbia, just to achieve divest or any other goals, like what kind of strategies or tactics we want to use. Is encampment is the right tactic or strategy or not? I think these questions, they are important for students to ask and like to study, just to reach a point that this is the main thing that could be sustained for our non-movement or our movement. Because in my conclusion, I'm talking about like different things, and one of them, like the role of epistemic violence and the responsibility of students to do that kind of work, not just, for example, to call for PDS, like PDS demands. They are important, but also now they are under a huge criticism in the context of Palestine. Like Palestinians themselves, they're asking about like PDS and BDS demands, because there is like if you are updating these demands, who's updating them and who has the legitimacy to talk about them and to discuss them without specific groups in the same society. So maybe I end here, and maybe we expand the discussion later if we have any questions. So thank you so much, and I appreciate you being here. Yeah.